Okay, welcome to the March 9th City Council Extended Study Session. We apologize for starting late. It's an unusual time right now. We have a lot to think about and plan for. You see, we only have 4 of us. Nobody's sick. That's the good news. We have Councilmember Lee. Thank you, Janice. We have Councilmember Lee and Councilmember Zahn in D.C. for the League of Cities, National Cities meeting that they're having, and we have Councilmember John Stokes choosing to stay home tonight. So the first thing we're going to do on the agenda is to vote on granting Councilmember Stokes permission to participate remotely. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
All those in favor say
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so we grant Councilmember Stokes permission to participate remotely. And the next thing we're going to do is going to amend the agenda to add Chief Hagan's update on measures taken by Bellevue with regards to the COVID-19 virus. Is there a motion to amend the agenda?
I move to.
That's going to come later, Chief.
It's going to come later.
Yeah. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I move to approve the revised agenda.
Okay, and a second we
Okay,
have.
second.
And all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye, okay, great. So now we've come to written and oral communications, and I'd like a little light, well, I probably can say it anyway. That was a test. So we have 30 minutes for written and oral communications, and speakers are going to be called in order. We allow 3 speakers to speak for something and 3 against the same topic. I understand we have 4 speakers signed up to speak on a particular topic, so you'll have to choose amongst yourselves who the 3 will be. And I am also opening this up to remote participation for people who are not here tonight. You are able to email the council your oral communication. If you put in the subject line oral communication, if we receive that, it will be forwarded to me and I will read it aloud. And I only get 3 minutes. I'll try to read fast. But the email address is council@bellevuewa.gov. So council, COUNCIL, at Bellevue, BELLEVUE, wa.gov, G-O-V. And if you email that to us and put in the subject line oral communication, I will read it. Okay, so we'll start with our communications. You can tell me who's signed up.
Our first speaker tonight is Helen Wentnick.
Helen? Welcome.
Greetings. My name is Helene Wenting, Director of Advancement with Community Homes. Our offices are located in Kirkland. I'm here tonight to thank you for your support through a regional coalition for housing, which is providing a portion of the $2.7 million in funding from the combined funders of the Arch Housing Trust Fund, King County Housing Finance Program, and Washington State Department of Commerce that will allow us to increase our capacity in King County to provide more permanent, supportive, community-based housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Community Homes believes that all adults with IDD deserve rich and meaningful lives in the community, and in turn, the community benefits from the inclusion of individuals of all abilities. With this new funding, we will be able to acquire and repurpose 2 properties in East King County to serve 8 adults with IDD who earn 30% AMI. We are also grateful that Bellevue is such a welcoming community. 21 of our 49 residents live in the city of Bellevue, and community activities help make the city a hub for our residents across East King County. Our residents are practicing protocols of social distancing right now due to COVID-19, but typically our residents are regulars at Highland Center and Crossroads Mall every weekend. We are also grateful for your support of our Housing Readiness Workshop series through Bellevue's Human Services funding. As you know, it is difficult to navigate the maze of affordable housing. For families who have a loved one with a disability, this maze is even more complex. With your support, we have helped hundreds of families learn about services and understand the housing models that can allow them to live their best lives in the community. We invite you to tour one of our homes soon and learn more about our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Helene. All right, who's our next
Our
speaker?
next speaker tonight is Gaurav Malhotra.
That was quick.
Come on up.
Thank you. This will be quick. This is my son.
Welcome.
Actually, he's really excited to see this meeting, so thank you for having us here. His first government meeting.
Thank you for being here.
Well, I am actually here to bring to your attention,
Before you start,
I'm
I
sorry,
ask that you give me your address, and also I just want to tell you that when that red light's flashing, the time is up. You get 3 minutes.
we'll probably be faster.
Okay.
Let's hope so. I'm just here to bring to your attention a local business that is partaking in extreme discrimination and putting a child's life in danger and causing a lot of anxiety. I am specifically referring to the Boys and Girls Club of Bellevue downtown. For the past 4 months or tad more, we have been complaining to them about sustained bullying, and they have refused to take any action. And this complaint was both via email, meeting the staff in person, and via phone. And finally, this past week, when my son was threatened, beaten up, I had to send the email all the way up to their national CEO, which is when they called me in and they had a conversation, and yet nothing happened. And Friday, I filed a police complaint, and lo and behold, they chose to expel my son. So I don't know what action the council can take, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention that this is really disheartening. It was a moment when he should have learned that, yes, on being on the right side doesn't mean that you get expelled. So I don't know whether you can censure them or any other action, but I hope there is something that could be done here. Thank you. Yeah, I told them you got expelled. Yeah, oh, and the bully is attending.
Is
And
what?
the bully still continues to attend the school, and it's likely because his uncle is a local quote-unquote celebrity. So,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. Well, thank you for your comments. Really
that's all I
appreciate
wanted to
it.
share with you.
Thank you. We're not going to do a back and forth, but we will get back to you on it.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Our
Up
next
next.
speaker signed up tonight is Jennifer Keller.
Let's go.
Hello.
My name is Jennifer Keller, also nicknamed Jan, and I live at 115 146th Avenue Southeast, Bellevue 98007. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and for the efforts that continue to go into the Environmental Stewardship Plan update. As you may know, I'm co-chair of People for Climate Action, or PCA Bellevue, and I just wanted to speak briefly tonight because I know you'll be going on a council retreat soon, and I'm sure you'll be having discussions of city priorities. Members of PCA.
Janice, can you mute your line?
And there would have been more of us tonight, but because of the virus, encouraging people to stay
Oh.
home. Members of,
Just a moment.
Sure.
That's Councilmember Stokes, because I hear Jackson. Councilmember Stokes, can you mute your line, please?
okay, my line, oh,
All right.
okay, my time is,
We'll start over. Anyway, you can keep going.
yeah, I'll just, yeah. So members of PCA Bellevue, Youth Connected with Bellevue Youth Link, Youth and Green Teams, and the high schools, and many other Bellevue residents who've been coming to the environmental stewardship workshops, all hope that you will place climate action very high in the priorities for the city. It's our actions today that will determine the kind of future that our youth face. I know that what came out of last fall's public workshops on the Environmental Stewardship Plan update, and from the thoughtful discussion that the council had in November when those targets and goals were being discussed, that there are a lot of voices asking for these leading edge goals. And now the discussion's continuing on into the actions that go with those kinds of goals. This is a great moment for us to be moving forward on that because there are so many outstanding ideas that have been taking shape in cities around the world, and we can tap into that collection of ideas and run with them and show leadership in that way. There's a lot of sharing of ideas through networks and organizations. There's C40 and ICLEI and Rocky Mountain Institute, Architecture 2030, and many more. It's time for our city to put as many great ideas as possible into our plan. The cities that are actually accomplishing significant reductions around the world generally have plans where the number of actions is more than 100. So, I don't know, let's not stop at 50. This is also a great time to be doing this work because King County is working on a climate action plan toolkit for cities, and we can actively collaborate with the county, suggesting ideas and eventually receiving ideas from the toolkit. So again, I'm grateful that Bellevue's engaged in the environmental stewardship plan update, actively gathering together plenty of great ideas to make the energy, transportation, and climate aspects of that plan truly effective in helping us reduce emissions. I hope you have a good and productive retreat and that you keep in mind the importance of putting climate action very high on the list of priorities for Bellevue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker signed up tonight is Betsy Nolan.
Ms. Nolan.
Hi there.
Hi there.
So nice to see all of you. So good evening. I'm Betsy Nolan, Imagine Housing CEO. I also reside at 4511 141st Avenue Southeast in Bellevue. My family's been in Bellevue for almost 45 years. I'm there with my 2 grown children and 5 grandchildren that are all in the Bellevue School District. And we love Bellevue. So myself and my colleague Alan are going to be speaking tonight as staff of Imagine Housing. And as you know, we're the East Side's most active nonprofit affordable housing developer. We own and manage 106 apartments in Bellevue, and those are for families and individuals earning up to 60% of area median income. First, I want to say thank you again for the 30 Bellevue development from this past year. That was just unbelievable. It's been open for almost 10 months. And as you know, we did that project together with the city and ARCH, a regional coalition for housing. So we're here to say thank you for the funding for ARCH and to ask you to continue more of it. And I hope to share a little bit about the impact of that. In the last 5 years, we've successfully completed or secured almost 500 units of affordable housing on the East Side, and that's been because of ARCH's contributions to us. And so those funds have ensured the success of every single new unit. We could not have done them without the ARCH contributions. So ARCH is important to us, and you are important to ARCH. Bellevue City is really the linchpin for what ARCH funding is all about, and we know what none of us could do it without Bellevue. Later this year, we're going to be applying to ARCH again for funding for a senior project that we're building in Bothell. They've already given us $750,000 towards purchasing the land from the city, and we'll be going in for more funding for capital expenditures this September. So I urge you to consider those 73 low-income senior households when you're thinking about how much money you may be able to allocate to ARCH this year. And the people in Bothell are going to say thank you as well. So before I turn it over to my colleague, you know, our communities are really, truly affordable. The person who's not speaking tonight is Megan Adams, our Director of Real Estate Development. She wants me to assure you that we're really working very hard to ensure that any rent increases that we're doing are being managed effectively. We want to ensure housing stability. Our on-site supportive services team, our case managers are all working to really make sure that people are staying in their homes. You guys are supporting vibrant futures for our community here in Bellevue, and we just want to say thank you for that. So let me turn it over to Alan.
Very good. With 17 seconds left, I'm Alan Daughterman.
Did I take the whole
I'm Senior
thing?
Real Estate Developer.
I thought you got your own 3 minutes.
I don't know, do I?
You do.
Oh, I do.
You
Well, I
can
won't take
have-
3 minutes, I promise.
Why don't we start the timer over for him? Okay, thanks.
So I'm Alan Daughterman. I'm Imagine Senior Real Estate Developer, and I will be the one leading the Sama Senior Apartments project for Imagine Housing. And this project, we are creating 100% new, 100% permanently affordable, let me start over. We will be creating this new 100% permanently affordable community for seniors age 55 and plus with very, very low fixed incomes. Imagine will purchase the land from the city of Bothell at the end of this year, and we will be applying for permanent public funding again this coming September 2020 from ARCH, King County, and the Department of Commerce. We've been told by the county and state funders that they are excited by this development and are looking forward to seeing the community become a reality. And as you know, low-income seniors are one of the most vulnerable populations in our community, and housing available to them is rare to find and challenging to finance. So we hope you will support ARCH this year in order for Sama Senior Apartments in Bothell to be a success. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
We also gave you some information packets, and so if you could take a few minutes to look through those would be great. Just like everybody else who had issues with the virus, we have delayed our fundraising gala from April to October, but we'll give you lots of opportunities to participate between now and then, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's our 3 for the ARCH proposal tonight. Is there anybody else signed up? Okay, so I should check my email and see, did anybody send anything, do you know?
Not that I saw.
Okay. I don't see anything either. Okay, so we will move on. So now, why don't we go ahead and have our update on the measures taken by Bellevue regarding the COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and council members. As you know, it's very difficult to, come on up, Chief, to turn on the news and not hear about the coronavirus and how it's impacting us internationally, nationally, as well as within our region. Tonight, we just like to brief the council on what measure, well, you as well as the viewing public, what measures the city of Bellevue has and is taking in response to the coronavirus. So joining us this evening is Bellevue Fire Chief Jay Hagan, who oversees the city's Emergency Preparedness Division, to provide the council with an update. So, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, City Manager Miyake, and members of council, both in person and on the phone. Thank you for the opportunity this evening to address you with a public health update. The COVID-19 crisis is now, in my estimation, an incident of international significance with far-reaching consequences. The tone and tenor of the public messaging over the last couple days has increased in seriousness, and we are responding appropriately through our regional coordination, our preventative actions, keeping our first responders safe, and focusing on promoting community awareness and enabling members of the community to take actions to safeguard their health. Our daily public health snapshot from Public Health Seattle-King County includes 116 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 20 deaths in King County, of which 19 are associated with a skilled nursing facility in Kirkland. Regarding our regional coordination, we are well connected with our local, state, and federal partners. We continue to partner with Public Health Seattle-King County, the Washington State Department of Health, and the CDC. We're making decisions and adjusting our plans based on the information that we receive almost daily, sometimes hourly, from our public health partners. Our overarching goals are to slow the spread of the virus, reduce opportunities for people to get sick, and to provide the best possible care for those that do. There's a steady flow of information that we monitor and use to guide our decisions and actions. There are 3 primary briefings that we're attending on a daily basis, or almost daily basis. A meeting of our regional emergency managers, an EMS briefing for our pre-hospital healthcare providers. These are our EMTs, paramedics, and administrators. And then I'm meeting with regional fire chiefs and EMS agency providers. Regarding our readiness posture, our Emergency Operations Center is activated and operational with staff. We also have staff on call 24/7 to respond to needs that may emerge after hours. All of our Bellevue departments have reviewed their continuity of operations, or COOP, plans, and portions of those plans have been activated as necessary and helpful. And the coordination that we have ongoing across departments is on a daily tempo and working really well. Regarding our first responders and keeping them safe, I just want to share with you, you should be so proud of your first responders and how they have risen to the challenge. It's been really amazing what they've done in every way. And I as well am so proud of not only our first responders, our dispatchers, and all of our Bellevue staff. We update our processes and procedures as necessary, primarily based on public health guidance. We've adapted to this changing situation quickly. I'd like to share with you a couple of examples. One would be working with our NORCOM dispatchers and call takers to adjust the interrogatory questions they're asking callers so that we can appropriately identify the community members at risk. We're also using new tools like air filtration, and this is smaller HEPA filters that we're using in our medical equipment we treat patients with and in our response and transport vehicles. I'd like to remind you that our mutual aid agreements are robust and in place, both in everyday use and during crisis. And regarding PPE, that stands for Personal Protective Equipment. We've planned ahead, we're networked with our neighbors, and we have adequate supplies for the near term. One change that community members may see is crews arriving on the scene and stepping off apparatus in what we call MEGG, M-E-G-G. That's a medical mask, protective eyewear, a blue medical gown, and then of course medical gloves. Regarding caring for our community, we're working on with the city team on consistent community messaging regarding protective actions, things that members in the community can do to protect themselves, such as hand washing, social distancing, or altering personal plans. And we're just really glad to see and promoting offering care and concern for neighbors and those around you, just checking on folks and being neighborly. We as the Bellevue staff realize this is a regional issue. We're not in this alone. The situation continues to evolve. I can say with confidence that our staff are galvanized around this challenge. We're bending a little bit to meet the need, but we're fully engaged. And with that short brief, I'd anticipate any comments or questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much for being here tonight. Does anybody have any comments or questions? How about you?
Thanks for the update, Chief Hagan. First of all, we're always proud of our first responders, but even in times like this, so thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And thank you for that brief recap on where we're at. My question to you is there anything else that the fire department needs at this point to make even more effective to deal with this crisis at this point? Is there any equipment needs or any other resource needs that you need to be more effective out in the field and to protect your firefighters?
Thank you for the question. We're well positioned to meet the challenge right now. I'll certainly keep that in mind, and I thank you very much for that question.
Okay.
We are well positioned now to meet the need into the near future.
Great, thank you.
So can you talk about how maybe neighbors can help those who are self-quarantined, how we can reach out safely to support those individuals?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Robinson. When I was mentioning that, I was talking about checking on neighbors that maybe aren't as mobile or aren't as visible, seeing if there's a way to support them, and maybe just discussing some of the needs they may be having.
Great, because I know I've dropped groceries off at some porches, so there's a lot of need out there with the people who are staying in.
Exactly right.
I know that Lake Hills, when we had our power outage so many years ago, came up with the concept of a handful of help, and so they challenged everybody to reach out to 5 people in their neighborhood to make sure that they are doing okay. So I think that's a appropriate thing to do at this time as well.
Absolutely, I would completely agree.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have the pleasure of our former colleague, former mayor of Bellevue, current King County Council member Claudia Balducci.
We forgot.
I know that.
Okay.
So go ahead. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I really appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you. I like to come by at least once a year and give a brief report on what's going on in this year at King County. Unfortunately, almost everything that we're doing right now has been overtaken by the public health response to COVID-19, which you were just hearing about. So I'm going to start there by sharing some basic information. And I want to just apologize a little bit in advance. I'm going to take a little bit of advantage of your broadcast and say some things that I know you all know, but I hope that the people listening will also know. Obviously, this virus outbreak is very troubling and concerning to people. We are, at this point, the epicenter here in East King County, and nobody really expected that to happen. And so I know there are a lot of very concerned people who want to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe and healthy. I have to start anytime I speak publicly about this by offering my deepest condolences, and I know we all share them, for the people at the Life Care Center with the tragedy that's unfolded there. The chief correctly reported the latest number of confirmed cases at 116 and deaths at 20 in King County. King County Public Health is currently reporting out confirmed cases and deaths once each day. And so the numbers are probably moving faster than we know. And because of the challenge with getting testing up and running, that was a national level challenge that really manifested itself here. We know we don't know all the cases that exist out there, that there are people in the community who are sick that we have not tested and don't know that they are ill. At this point, there are no longer any restrictions on who can get tested. Testing has to be ordered by a healthcare provider. So a person who is feeling ill or who may be having symptoms of any kind and are in one of the at-risk groups, which means over the age of 60 and with underlying health conditions like diabetes, heart or lung conditions, should call their healthcare provider. That's how you get to request a test. If you cannot reach your healthcare provider, there is a King County hotline. I don't have it right in front of me here, but I'll make sure that we get it to you so that we can continue to push that out where people can call. Recommendations to the general public include that employers should make it feasible for employees to work in ways that minimize close contact with large numbers of people, and avoid bringing large groups of people together for events and community gatherings. Of course, we should all stay home if we're feeling sick, and wash our hands very frequently, clean frequently, touch surfaces, and avoid touching your face, which is something I struggle with. We continue, and we all have to work on that. At this time, and we're getting a lot of questions about this, public health is not recommending school closures unless there is a confirmed case within the school. You are probably receiving a lot of questions about this. I know that we are, public health is, and the bottom line is that as this infection has spread across the globe, there's a fair amount of data being collected about who's being infected and what the risk factors are. And children have not been shown to be at high risk of illness, nor have they been able to establish the role of children in transmitting the disease. And so what we do know about the potential benefit of widespread school closures to public health has not at this point outweighed for public health experts what they know of the negative impacts of closing down schools, which are vectors of infection don't stop, they go in different directions, and kids lose education, there's economic burden on families and disruption of their daily lives. So it's a very evolving situation. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, but I just wanted to share some basics. And I said, I'm sure that you all are probably very well informed about this, but I know that a lot of people watch the meeting, and so thank you for letting me take advantage for a moment. And before I do just a general county, what's going on at the county report, which is what I was here for, I would be happy to answer any questions about the COVID-19 response if you have any.
So the deputy mayor has come up with the coronavirus call center number for you.
Oh, excellent.
So it's 206-477-3977.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to pause for a moment to give our remote participants a chance to ask some questions. So Councilmember Zahn, do you have a question?
Yes, so I just wanted to thank you, Claudia, for providing that information. As a recent addition to the King County Board of Health, I've also been receiving information, and I can appreciate the fact that that things are changing so rapidly that we need to make sure that we're taking care of the resources that are actually at the Board of Health that's trying to make these really tough decisions based on quickly moving information. So definitely giving this update is very helpful. I think that folks are concerned about how long this might go on. I know there's been some discussion about impact to the community also from the standpoint of small businesses that are struggling because as we do work around social distancing, we're seeing a reduction in number of people that are frequenting our businesses. So the more that we keep our communities up to date, the more helpful it is. So thank you.
Can you say anything about the support for small businesses during this time?
A little bit. The federal government, state government, and state government have both passed funding packages to help support the public health response, but also some funding for small businesses. I'm not going to get the number right, but Congressman Derek Kilmer was in town this week and talked about that the Small Business Administration has received a fairly significant additional allocation of money to help support small businesses during this time. The state also is focusing on that, and tomorrow at the County Council, we'll be adopting an emergency, or taking up, I shouldn't say adopting, we'll vote on a funding measure that includes some funds to help support organizations and individuals that are in need of support, because there is a major economic impact. You heard earlier, one of the main things that's happening here, and I'm sure you'll hear about it from your friend across the street, Maidenbauer Center, is it's spring, and there's all of those scheduled fundraisers that are a big part of our nonprofit's budget all being canceled. So we're all going to have to look back in a few weeks and see how we can prop those folks up, because they provide a lot of these direct services, and they'll be having a hard time doing that this year.
So if there is a small business that is suffering the effects of this incident right now, is there a number that they should call? Should they call the Small Business Administration, or?
That would be a good place to start. There's like the hotlines that have been stood up are more about responding to the immediate emergency. So there's a hotline specifically for family members and people associated with the Life Care Center. There's the one that's for general people. I don't know of a hotline, not in King County anyway, that's been set up for small businesses yet, but there is quite a bit of discussion going on around this. There was also an announcement today, I want to say a business consortium with some nonprofits got together to announce, I want to say $2.5 million in support for people who are going to potentially lose pay.
Okay, that's great. Well, I do know that some people have reached out to our Bellevue Economic Development Department, and so if they would like to do that, again, we will make sure that they are connected to the appropriate resources.
Very good.
Councilmember Stokes, do you have any?
One more comment?
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I add one more comment?
Yes.
In our closing session at the National League of Cities, I was just looking, we're actually going to hear from officials from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services about the COVID-19, and we've been invited to, there is a call-in for a White House briefing also on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So as I learn any new information, I will share that back with staff to disseminate.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions, and the comments have been really great. It sounds like we're working well together and coordinating, so that's amazing. So that's good.
Okay, thank you. How about around the table here?
I said one question, Claudia, around the testing. So are there no longer any requirements or criteria that one has to meet in order to actually receive or have a test? Because what I had heard some frustration from some people is that they had to have been around someone that had recently traveled or other symptoms. So, and not everybody obviously fit that criteria. So now can anyone have a test? And then also on top of that, I believe the governor now passed a bill that would allow anyone who couldn't afford to have a test to still have a test. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure,
Thank
yes.
you.
The guidance around who can receive a test, and again, the request has to be made by a healthcare professional, has evolved, and it started with very, very restrictive. It started with you had to have traveled from basically the Wuhan province or been in contact with somebody. And now there are no longer any restrictions. That's not to say that everybody's going to get a test who calls, but there are no restrictions anymore. You can call and say, I have got symptoms, I would like to be tested. The doctor will decide whether or not they ask for a test. And then frankly, we're still ramping up in the region to have enough tests to say yes to everybody who asked, but anybody can request a test. Part of the challenge is that with this virus is that it's new. They call it novel corona, it's new virus. Right. There's no immunity, there's no vaccine, there's no treatment. So one piece of guidance that I think is important for people, if they're feeling ill, even if they can't get a test, they should just treat themselves. They should stay home, take fluids, take care of themselves as if they might be contagious and are sick, as you would if you had the flu. So I hope that helps. Oh, and sorry, you asked about the governor. The state passed, there was an emergency measure. It came from the governor, and the insurance commissioner implemented two different things. One, that if you don't have medical insurance, your testing will be covered. And the health insurance commissioner directed that insurance companies should waive copays and deductibles for people getting tested.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now,
Thank
state
you.
of
Now,
the
my
county.
report, yes. And I'll try to make it really brief. I'm taking an awful lot of time here, but thank you. Tomorrow is the presidential primary here in Washington. I think you know that because they're doing it right across the hall. As of this morning, we've had almost 500,000 ballots received for over 36% turnout, which is higher than projected. We're also seeing very high usage of our 6 voter centers, including the one here. And so voters can still register in person. This is the first year when you have same-day registration, and they can register and vote until 8 p.m. tomorrow night. We had heard some reports from around King County, including in Bellevue, that people might be trying to drop their ballots in drop boxes that are full. If that is the case, if you all hear of any full drop boxes, please contact King County Elections and they'll dispatch somebody to retrieve the ballots. Other priorities are the things that you would expect. We're working on housing and transportation, the environment, and also trying to fund good local projects. On housing, I think I've said this before, but over 156,000 King County households are severely cost burdened, and we're trying to mobilize to do something about that. I know you are too tonight. So at the Affordable Housing Committee, where Mayor Robinson ably represents the city, we have our 2019-2020 work plan to analyze and identify new revenue sources to meet the need, which is to build approximately 44,000 build or preserve 44,000 new homes affordable to people at 80% or below of AMI in 5 years, which is an incredible goal. It's really, it would be more building of affordable homes than we've ever seen here before. So we heard some news that the funding package in Olympia did not pass today, so we're just going to keep on working on it. There's a sales tax measure that is available, but the idea of a progressive business tax didn't quite make it over the finish line. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to that. I want to thank Bellevue for taking action on House Bill 1406, and that will maximize the amount of sales tax swap that the state has offered to the cities and the county in order to maximize our funding for housing without raising taxes. So that was really great, and it took action by the council, so thank you. We are working on recommending zoning and land use actions, including policies at the Vision 2050 plan that's coming out of PSRC, and countywide planning policies. Again, Mayor Robinson and Councilmember Robertson are working on those issues. We're creating a dashboard at the Affordable Housing Committee to try to show our results, make sure that we're looking at what we are doing, whether it's having the impact we want, and then shifting our approach as needed. And I wanted to say thank you to Mayor Robinson. She had a really good idea that I've been pushing at King County that I think we're going to take up to try to start charting all of the different activities that were recommended by the original task force, which kicked off all this work, and give organizations the opportunity to show which things they're doing so that we can sort of start to show our collective effort and encourage each other that way. On homelessness, I know you all are aware that last year King County Council and Seattle City Council established a regional homelessness governance authority. I had heard that it was getting ready to stand up a meeting this week. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if that's really going to happen, but the goal is to have the entirety of the governing committee with 12 members that include 3 from the Sound Cities Association and the implementation board all stood up and doing their work this year, and working on those 5-year plans and the sub-regional plans that were promised that I think should be really important to the east side to have your own plan that the city should be engaged in helping to build. Update on the homeless shelter. The parties, as you know, Congregations for the Homeless and their partner Inland Housing Group has been negotiating with King County to close this purchase and sales agreement that was already adopted. There was a few key issues that needed to be resolved, like the price. And so, yeah, so we're still working on those things, but they're getting close, and I expect we will see a document to approve shortly. And I'll move on to transportation. So Sound Transit, you all know, is building out an awful lot of transit in this town, but we've been talking at King County about what are the next steps for the bus system. So as I think you all are aware, Seattle has had since 2014 a transportation benefit district, which raises sales tax and MVET, and they buy about 300,000 hours worth of bus service from King County each year. This was meant to be a sort of a backfill for Seattle after that last bus measure failed in 2014, but it created a two-tier system where Seattle gets to buy service, and that sort of jumps it to the front of the line, and everybody else gets what comes out of the service guidelines. And so this is the year that Seattle's TBD expires, and they're going to go out for a renewal. Some of us, especially folks who represent the east side, like we had representatives from Kirkland and Redmond and myself, sort of raised our hands and said, I thought that wasn't supposed to be permanent. I thought we were going to have a county-wide funding system. So we've been having discussions about whether and what to propose in this regard. And I started the year feeling very strongly after we've done some pre-work in the previous 2 years, that we should go out this year, we should go out and try to renew what Seattle had and add in the non-Seattle cities so that we could start to build out additional bus service that helps to feed the regional system. I was only encouraged in this effort when I heard the details around how many employees were coming to Bellevue in the next 3 years. I will say that we've been working very hard. It's quite challenging. It's a time-sensitive activity that we're engaged in to try to build a proposal this quickly. But we're trying. We hope to have something to share with you shortly that is taking city input and reflects that to you. But again, with the coronavirus, with the potential downturn in the economy, the risk of sales tax particularly being down, and then who knows what will happen with transit ridership given people's directive to stay away from one another. It's a challenging time is all I'll say. And it would be really helpful if you all here as the representatives of Bellevue believe it's important that we push forward. If we could hear that from you in some way, that would be meaningful. And conversely, if you feel like there's a different discussion we should be having, then that's important as well. So I just bring that as a report, a promise for more information shortly, and I hope to hear from you all what your interests are. Quickly on the environment, you heard a little bit about this at public comments, which I was glad to hear. I know that the city and the county share a concern with doing what we can at the local and regional level to combat climate change. And it's correct, we passed a measure that I sponsored and a funding source for these climate action toolkits that will be created. The idea being that a city could use it, or any jurisdiction could use the toolkit to assess their particular profile for greenhouse gas emissions and therefore craft strategies that address that profile. So it'd be different if you are a bedroom community way out in East King County that mostly sends people commuting every day versus, whether you might have industrial plants in your town. I mean, you could sort of imagine what that would look like. We are currently in procurement for the consultant that will help to build the toolkits, and we will be reaching out to the public and to the cities to help us to build them because they're meant to be a resource. We're also working on our strategic climate action plan update. This is King County's individual government approach to address our greenhouse gas emissions and our resilience to climate change. Some of the progress goals that we're going to be reporting that we're really proud of. We are so close to planting 1 million trees by the end of 2020. It was well over 900,000 the last time, and I planted a few weekends ago, so I'm pretty proud of those myself. They're named. I can introduce you to them. They're awesome. Bruce the Spruce was my favorite. We're also working on transitioning to an all-battery electric bus fleet, so that will be part of that. We also need to make better progress on our goals, and there will be workshops, and organizations can request climate presentations or a workshop by our King County Climate staff. If you're interested in doing that, please reach out to my office. We'll help to schedule it. You all are keenly aware of the Parks Levy. We're starting to roll out Parks Levy programs. Land conservation was a big part of that, speaking of climate change. But also, this was an $810 million levy that passed with over 70% approval, so thank you to the voters. We have more equity grants, $50 million for the East Trail project here, $44 million for public pools. There's a number of new grant programs that will be part of that measure, and we will be pushing them out. So hopefully Bellevue will apply and we'll be able to help out with some of the work here. Almost done. PASTA, the not aptly named, it doesn't make any sense. It's called the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Act. This was a piece of funding that came through Sound Transit 3. I won't bore you with the background, but it is very fascinating. In any event, it is going to raise something like $318 million over the next 15 years, and it is dedicated to education. But it comes through King County. So it's been a very interesting couple of years as we did the planning and community process. But the county decided that we will allocate, of the program funds, about 52% for early learning facilities and early intervention facilities. About 38% for the King County Promise, which is a sort of a scholarship 13th year program that does mentoring in the latter years of high school and helps kids to transition to and succeed in college. And then about 10% for community organizations that are working with kids through K through 12. East Side organizations were very involved in helping to craft this plan, and I know they'll be very involved in applying for grants as the money starts to roll in. Finally, I'm very proud to say we have small but mighty grant programs in District 6, where we're able to help out some organizations on the east side. We were able to support exercise programs for people with disabilities at Highland Community Center, yoga for seniors at Evergreen Court in Bellevue, scholarships and equipment for the Sammamish Interlake Boys Lacrosse and the Newport Sammamish Interlake Girls Lacrosse, among many other things. We did some housing stability investments for Attain Housing, Bellevue Life Spring, and the Muslim Community Resource Center. And we always have vans. Each year we have 3 to 4 vans that we can donate to organizations. And so this year we had surprisingly difficult time trying to find organizations that needed vans. Yeah, there was a van saturation or something going on. So if you know any organization that serves District 6 and could use a van, please always point them our way. And finally, we were able to, through a special program that was, I think, pretty recent, give a grant to VFW Post 2995 in Redmond to upgrade their facility. It's barely in Redmond, though. I think it serves a lot of vets in Bellevue. So that is a lengthy report. I'm going to pause there, answer any questions, and again, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. That's an excellent report. I'm going to see if Councilmember Stokes has any questions or comments to begin. Okay. Councilmember Zahn, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, thank you so much for that very, very thorough presentation. It sounds like there's a lot of things that are happening in our community and that'll benefit our community. You talked about the environmental toolkit as part of that. So is that part of the K4C work? Because I know there was some discussion about a recommitment letter. And is that toolkit part of that?
Councilmember Zahn, the climate toolkits will be created by the same staff in King County that staffed the K4C, and I expect that they will bring that work to the K4C. I don't believe it's part of the recommitment letter, though. It's a work item that should be reported out, and we've got a meeting coming up, so they'll undoubtedly report it out at that meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. That was a great report. I want to talk a little bit about the potential bus levy, if I can. I know that we are trying to get Metro to come to a meeting and talk to us about this, and I know that it's a lot in play because you guys have to decide by May 8th, I think. Is that right?
One would have to decide by May 8th. We have to decide by the end of March.
Okay. So, yes. And I know that the county wanted to put it on the ballot for August so that, because Seattle wants to put theirs on for November if the regional one doesn't pass.
It's actually slightly more complicated, but
No.
we are focusing on August. Seattle is also focusing now on August for reasons I would happily bore you with, but they are very intricate.
Oh, interesting.
And so what we're doing is we're taking the next month to see if we can put together a countywide package, and if we cannot, then they will put together a Seattle package and go and vote by May 8th to be on the ballot by August. That's why we've split this time the way we have.
Got it. Okay. So a couple of things that I think would be really important if this levy does come forward
Sure.
this year. We know that the Metro plan, the hours that are in their plan, this would, it gets us a lot closer to that, but it's not even, it wouldn't even cover the hours that are in their ultimate plan. So making sure that we have a lot of those hours that connect job centers for me and for Bellevue, I think would be really, really important. I know that that's TBD later, but also there seems to be a discussion about electrification versus more hours, and that's something you guys have to struggle with, but for the east side, I think having the connection to the job centers is really critical because, as you know, we have just one employer that's adding 15,000 more jobs. We've got a lot more employers, and so we're going to need a lot more transit service coming to Bellevue. So I'm on the RTC, and I'm looking forward to working on that issue over the next couple of years. But those are just some of the things I've been mulling over.
That kind of feedback is really helpful. Thank you, Councilmember.
Okay,
I'll take
yeah,
it back.
thanks. And we would love to have Metro come. So I'll just put that out there. And I know that we're working on that with them. So then on the pools, I know Kirkland and Redmond have had council meetings on theirs. We're having our update in May. So I think there's getting to be more regional pressure and enthusiasm for more water. So hopefully we can take advantage of some of that nickels for pools. And I know the $8 million going to King County Aquatic Center, and that's really important. I'm excited about that. I said it to them, but I'll say it to you so you know what I've said to them on the dais is I really hope that some of that $8 million goes towards their HVAC system because when swimmers are there all weekend long, sometimes they're throwing up because the air quality is so bad.
I'm so sorry to
seriously.
hear that.
No, it's okay. A lot of pools are that way, but they need to, anyway.
Yeah.
That's just a little personal experience.
I'll remember to share that.
Yeah, share that. But their HVAC, I think they said they were going to do it, but I hope that they will because we want our swimmers to, it's a healthy activity. You want them to stay healthy while they're competing. I think that's all I wanted to cover. A lot of the information is really great and looking forward to continuing to work together. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you so much for the report and the update. Just one quick question. In addition to the affordable housing, are we also doing anything in terms of the providing affordable commercial spaces throughout King County for mom and pop shops?
So King County does very, very little in the way of economic development. We have got one person in this whole big county that we have, and she mainly, at least up until recently, has focused on workforce development. But we're really aware of the issue with commercial space and have started to raise it from time to time to think about ways we could engage with that. I am actually bringing an amendment. It's not exactly on point, but I'm bringing an amendment tomorrow to our King County real estate asset management plan. We adopt it once a year. It sort of sets we own a lot of buildings. What are we going to do with them? And I'm joining with our new council member, Zahalai, to bring an amendment to say that we should scan our buildings to see if we can use any unused space for nonprofits that are in need of, there's a huge crunch for space for nonprofits. Don't know if that will come to anything, but we look for opportunities to try to help. So I appreciate that reinforcement, and I will continue to, but there's not much that we do at this point. Yeah, good question, thanks.
Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
No, I just want to thank you so much for the great report. And the vans, what's the criteria for a nonprofit organization to make that request for a van?
So it needs to be, obviously, a nonprofit organization, can't be for-profit. Because each district gets a number of vans, I'd like to give mine to organizations that serve District 6. But if you have one that serves a different district, I will happily share them with my colleagues. Okay. And it has to be used to transport people. That's the main criteria, is that it can't be used to haul stuff only. It has to be used to transport people.
Gotcha.
And they need insurance. We learned this because we had a great organization we were able to give a van to, but first they had to get insurance.
Thank you.
So thank you for the report. Yeah. And I echo Councilmember Robertson's emphasis on connecting the neighborhoods to the transit nodes. You know, light rail's 3 years away, and a lot can happen in 3 years. a lot of good can happen in 3 years. And I'm really curious as to what kind of a study we can do to try to plan for the future connectivity. So if we think that autonomous trams might be in our future, should we be looking at infrastructure to have one connector from each neighborhood coming into the central hub of downtown Bellevue? Things like that. So I would encourage the county to think beyond the current need and look at the future need.
That's really important. I agree completely. The one thing I didn't mention is we will be taking up it's a very broad level policy document that we're calling the Mobility Framework, also something that I pushed to have done. And it consists of a series of just really basic policy statements like we should be pursuing innovation. We should be thinking about how we move people as opposed to how we move vehicles, because vehicles could change. The way we're providing movement now isn't going to be the same 20, 30 years from now. But how do we make sure that whatever we adopt works well for everybody? Because as you can imagine, most transportation systems work pretty well for people who are wealthy and have a lot of control over their time. If the less resources you have, the less control over your time you have, the harder it is to get around. And so we have these, and so once we adopt these policies, then we turn to updating our long-range plan, our strategic plan, and our service guidelines, and all these documents together drive how we invest in transit services. So that sort of stepwise process is going to be set in motion here very soon. It's something that will come to the RTC, and I think that at PSRC in our long-range transportation plan, which we will start updating next year, we should again be pushing for thinking bigger, better thinking about how do we make a transportation system evolve into something that works better for people and takes advantage of new technology, but also new service methodologies. And then frankly, lots of old technology, which I would not really be doing my job here if I didn't thank the city for all the bike lanes and all the work you've done on safety for pedestrians. The last vote I took as a council member here was to adopt Vision Zero, and it's just stunning to me when I see just in my own community the changes that are occurring, and I really appreciate that, and that's got to be part of the whole transportation system. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Thank you for your support of the city.
You bet.
Really appreciate it.
All right.
It's good to see you back at council.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the night. Stay well.
I'm going to give us a 5-minute, which probably will be a 10-minute break, and we will come back shortly. Okay, we're going to reconvene. Thank you for your patience with us. City Manager, could you please introduce our next topic?
Sure. The next topic is an update from the Washington the State Department of Licensing on the Real ID law. And just by way of background, the Real ID Act passed by Congress in 2005 establishes standards for the issuance of identification, such as driver's licenses and identification cards. Tonight we have a representative from the State Department of Licensing who will share how the implementation of the Real ID Act will impact, among other things, the TSA airport screening. So joining us this evening is Kyle Stannard, our Assistant City Manager, as well. To his left is Teresa Bernstein, she is the Department of Licensing Executive Director. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kyle.
Thank you, City Manager, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of the City Council far and wide. We are excited to be here to share some information and taking a line from King County Councilwoman Balducci, realizing we have a broader audience than even just in the room. I think this is a great opportunity to do some outreach in partnership with the Department of Licensing to let people know of a pretty significant change that's coming up on October 1st. When you think about change, managing change, the longer the process, the harder it can be sometimes. So from an act that went into effect in 2005 until now, there's a lot of work to do. So we are very fortunate to have Director Bernstein here with us tonight to share with us what the Department of Licensing is doing to inform the public and work to implement this federal level law. And then at the very end, I'll swoop back in and talk a little bit about what we can do in partnership to make sure that as city staff and here at city facilities, we have more information in case anybody has any questions between today and October 1st. So with that, I will turn it over to Teresa to share with us what's going on.
So good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, council members, and city manager. Thank you so much for having me here tonight and for your interest in your partnership. So as city managers already discussed, this act has been around for quite a while. It followed the 9/11 Commission Report of 2004 recommending best practices for identification to board airplanes and to enter restricted federal facilities. So now, here we are, October 2020 is the enforcement date of Real ID. What that means is after October 1st of 2020, you will no longer be able to board a domestic flight with your standard driver's license or ID card. So that's a real sea change in the way we travel domestically. And as Kyle mentioned, takes a lot of education. Couple notes, it doesn't affect travelers 18 and younger. And then it's regarding access to restricted federal facilities, not access to facilities that you can readily go into without showing an ID. Think about the Post Office, Social Security Administration. So our education campaign, which I'll talk about in just a moment, emphasizes options. So my goal as the director is to implement this federal act orderly, but also to do it with the most compassion and options for persons. So our information campaign really tries very hard to focus on underserved communities. So there is a whole list of documents that you could use right now to board an aircraft if you went to TSA's website. And those will still be true after the implementation date of October 1st. So just a few examples: a US passport card. That's what I have in my purse at the moment, right? Foreign passport, green card, military ID, tribal cards, green cards. So all of those documents will be able to use to board a domestic flight. Now, one choice that you can get as far as a state-issued compliant document, so a document issued by my agency, is the enhanced driver's license or ID card. So here's the interesting thing about this is the enhanced driver's license and ID card were created as a result of the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative to basically help you travel quickly and easily into the Canadian border. So this document was created nothing to do with Real ID. It just so happens this document meets all of the requirements of the Real ID Act in its physical characteristics and in all of its components. Because it is a travel document used to cross the Canadian border, you have to be a US citizen to get it, right? For that reason only. So now, in order for the state to be compliant with the act, regular driver's licenses and ID cards that look a little bit like this have a marking on them. After 2018, if you go in and you get or renew your standard driver's license or ID card, it's going to have these words on it: federal limits apply. And this is widely referred to as a negative marking. So there were a few choices in the state's wording. We chose what we felt was the most gentle wording we could apply. Other states, I'm trying to find the judicious word for it, other states have different words. And I will be very direct that these words are causing a lot of concern, particularly members of our immigrant community that don't know what this means, right? So we try in our information campaigns to educate people. What this simply means is it differentiates from a state-issued Real ID compliant document. So the federal limits are boarding a domestic flight after October 1st and entering restricted federal facilities. There are no other federal limits. So this is just one visual where we try to give options to people to explain the difference between a regular driver's license and an enhanced driver's license. So again, to get the enhanced license, you have to be a US citizen, right? You have to verify your social security number, your residency, and your identity. To get a regular driver's license, you're going to verify who you are and your Washington residency. So we have had an extensive education and outreach campaign for several years now. And again, we're trying to emphasize you have options. This is a little different approach than the federal government itself is taking and other states are taking. So often you will hear, get a Real ID compliant document. What we are trying to emphasize is you may already have what you need. So we have contracted with several firms to emphasize options. So for example, if you were to go to ID 2020 WA, it's going to ask you a series of questions. My 1980s term, which I have to find a better one, is a wizard. I think there's a much more updated term than that, but it's going to ask you, like, how old are you? Do you fly? Do you have this document? And depending on how you answer, it's going to tell you what your options are. And then if you are eligible to get an enhanced driver's license and you want one, it's going to tell you how to get one. So we have 3 dedicated outreach staff who are in this room to do outreach, particularly to underserved communities. And right now, pretty much our sole bandwidth and focus is Real ID. We try very hard to partner with the various airports and recently did some press events with TSA and the airports in Spokane and Seattle. And then again, lots of outreach that we work mainly through community organizations so we can maximize our outreach and work with organizations that organizations that immigrants, persons of color, underserved communities feel most comfortable with. This is just a couple of visuals. So as the deadline approaches, we're trying to have a bit of a sense of urgency. So it's a tough message because basically it is you have options, but if you choose the enhanced, come in now. Don't wait. So the enhanced driver's license and ID card take longer to issue because of the citizenship documents and other documents. So as the demand for those documents increase, our wait times increase, right? And unfortunately, we did take some budget cuts last year in our ability to ramp up for this initiative. So how we're trying to manage it is through education and outreach. And we're trying to say, come in now. Even if you just have to renew your regular driver's license, come in now. We've done our very best to predict wait times leading up to October 1st, 2020, and there are so many variables. When you have 6.5 million customers and are trying to predict human behavior, basically your guarantee is you're going to get it wrong. But we have tried very hard with all the variables, and we're looking at about, I'm sitting on 18-minute wait times right now. It's wonderful. But leading up to this, we're leading up to 1 hour statewide average. Statewide average is very deceiving. So depending on the time of day, the office, the day of the week, on the I-5 corridor, you could multiply that by 3 or 4. So we are, again, I'm not using that as a scare tactic, but just as a reality why we're, the summers are beautiful here. You probably don't want to wait in line in the DMV during your summer. As wonderful as my employees are. So come in now. Excuse me, sorry. I'm often asked about readiness. How ready are we for this act? And that is a bit of a tough question for me to answer. I am not TSA. I'm not an airport, right? And most often what you will hear in the press is the number of state-issued Real ID documents. So you'll often hear only X% of Washington residents or US residents have this document. I personally do not think that's the right measure, because so many other documents are acceptable for air travel. So right now, about 17% of our driver's license and ID card holders, have these enhanced documents. We are working to try to add up the number of persons that hold all the other eligible documents, which is not an easy number to arrive at. But 42% of us have US passports, for example. Several 100,000 of us have military ID cards because we're in the military, are we're families. So it just gives you an idea, and we're trying to add those up, but there's a lot of assumptions in those numbers. And this, lastly, from my last slide, is just some additional resources you can go to. We're trying very hard to push people to our website, ID 2020 WA, because it does such a good job of explaining exactly what your options are.
So a daunting assignment, to be sure. When asked if we could help with communication, the answer was, of course, yes. We want to make sure that those who are living, working, and playing in Bellevue, as you mentioned, have somewhere else to be this summer than standing in line. So a few things that we're prepared to do, and we'll continue to collaborate with the Department of Licensing between now and October and beyond, is they've have some great materials. So there's links to the websites in your agenda memo. There's a fact sheet. The DOL is providing some brochures for us to place here in City Hall, community centers, and mini City Hall at the appropriate time. So we're working with staff to roll that out, along with some FAQ information for some of the questions that we would anticipate in Bellevue in particular, many of which were covered in tonight's presentation. We also will be working with our comms team to publish a news story to feature this, to make sure that we highlight the message as well. We heard in the presentation tonight that in the last quarter there was 32 outreach events that took place. We'll be looking at any partnership opportunities that the Department of Licensing staff can be here in Bellevue during our events to provide information directly. And then in addition, we've been asked if we could help make connections with other businesses and groups such as the Chamber or the King County Library System, which we will be doing. So I'd say that one ask for council members is that as you hear any confusion from constituents, point them to the website, point them back to us, and we'll certainly do the same. And then also, this is the first opportunity to start answering questions. So if there are any questions, we'd be happy to do what we can to
Thank
answer
you
them
for the
tonight.
presentation. I assume this week's a good week to get this done, not many lines.
It's a great week. Last week was a great week, so come on in. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with our remote callers. Councilmember Zahn, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Councilmember Stokes, do you have any questions or comments? Okay.
Yeah, great presentation. What?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it really covered a lot of the details on it, and it is complicated, isn't it? My only question is, I have an enhanced driver's license. It's not due to renew for another year. Is it the same process going through? Is there anything different now?
Certainly. So nothing is different. The good news is you don't have to represent all of those documents. And I have to give my pitch. You can do it up to a year in advance with no penalty on your fees. But no, fundamentally, a council member does not change. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good presentation.
Councilmember, Councilmember
Mayor?
Zahn?
Sorry, I had to unlock my phone. Sorry about that. Thank you for the presentation. I really like two particular items that you talked about. One is data to try to forecast the volume of people that may need to get their driver's license changed, because I think the more that we understand what the outreach might need to look like, the better off we are. And then I'm also thinking that from a partnership standpoint, I'm wondering if partnering with you talked about the library, but also the school district and perhaps some of our faith communities that might also be able to reach out to some of the folks in terms of messaging as well.
Good suggestions. Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you for the update. Sort of along similar lines in terms of partnership, and just really curious if there's an opportunity to do this in concert with the Census 2020 work, since there's a lot of on-the-ground work happening with that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we will take a look at those opportunities. We had some conversations around messaging on that, and there's some advantages to partnering on messaging on that, and then there's some confusion. I think there is, definitely two different federal initiatives with different prongs, but that is one where we'll take a look at what the audience in the event is and see how we can best partner without confusing the message, for sure.
Good question. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. So if you go from a regular driver's license to the real ID, does that have to be done in person? Because I know you can renew your driver's license online.
When you get your first time, whether you're upgrading or going in, yes, you do have to come in person per our agreements with the federal government.
Okay. And when I got last time I renewed my license, I think I had a passport and social security number, but I still would need to go in if I'm upgrading from a standard license.
You absolutely do, which
Okay.
is part of why we have this demand and workload, and there's a checklist online that'll tell you what to bring.
Got it. And then once you have the Real ID, can you renew online in the future?
Yes, you can. So by state law, whether it's standard or enhanced, you can renew every other cycle. And
Okay.
then every 12 years, we want you in for your stunning photo.
Exactly, I know, my photo's very old at this point. Do you think that there's any negative connotations of not having Real ID for people that may not need it, who have a passport, for example?
That is a great question, and I've worked very extensively with immigrant rights organizations who do believe that there is a stigmata associated with persons having the regular driver's license that has the marking on it and then enhanced. And that is partially why we emphasize options, why we try hard not to, if you will, push the enhanced document and have it as an option. Many people that get the enhanced document are persons that don't generally travel and don't have a passport.
Okay, so if you don't have the enhanced, other than the checklist things on there, for example, banking or things like that, we don't expect to see a change in what ID is required for the non-checklist items on there?
Gotcha. No, absolutely not. And we have worked very hard with financial institutions, state agencies, federal agencies to understand that this is about air travel and restricted federal facilities.
Okay. Well, because we all have passports in my house, and I don't know that I want to spend the extra money, so that's why I'm trying to figure out, do I need to do it or not? So, and I figure a lot of other people have the same question. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, and thank you for the great presentation. Just a couple of quick questions for you. So are we one of the last states to get this implemented?
Yes.
Correct? We are. Okay.
Depends what you mean by implemented.
Well,
I mean, and I don't mean
okay.
to overcomplicate that,
Yeah.
but we all have the same deadline now.
Okay.
But we are ahead of the game in many ways. But yeah, it took us a while to decide. Yes.
So I'm curious then, because you must have gone and looked at what other states had did to implement their program. So what did they see, or what were some of the key learnings that you saw from some other states that implemented the Real ID Act?
Certainly. That's a great question. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of great answers because we all have the same deadline. Nobody has seen the actual enforcement of it.
Interesting.
Certainly, every state is implementing slightly differently. Many other states don't have the enhanced driver's license and then have created their own document. So a key difference is that because the enhanced driver's license was created for travel, you have to be a citizen, whereas to get a Real ID compliant document in other states, you could also be a permanent resident. So there's been an additional education component, but as near as I can tell, working with our national associations and my partners in other states, we are quite ahead of the game as far as planning and education.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm assuming since this is a state-run campaign that you can go to any Department of Licensing to do this? You don't have to go to your local one? Is that true to get this?
That is correct.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for the presentation. Great
Thank you.
information. Okay, City Manager, what's up next?
Sure, our next topic is on affordable housing, the affordable housing strategy, and it's an implementation briefing. And so just by way of background, Bellevue adopted an affordable housing strategy back in June of 2017. Since then, a number of updates have been in front of council in terms of how we're implementing that strategy. And tonight represents another scheduled visit to the council in terms of how well we have been doing in terms of implementing the housing strategy. Tonight is an opportunity to ask questions as well as providing further direction to the staff tonight on affordable housing. And with that, we have joining us this evening is Matt Cummins, the Director of Community Development. To his right is Janet Loyne, our Senior Planner, and to her right is Emil King, the Assistant Director in Community Development. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake and Mayor Robinson and Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis. We're happy to be back tonight for our twice-a-year affordable housing update. I thought just by way of introduction, housing is a topic that is very pervasive in the region. It's coming up in virtually every context involving government. You all have heard quite a bit about housing and labor attraction through our economic development plan update efforts, and the ability to create not just housing but affordable housing is something that is on everybody's minds as we look to be tens of thousands of units deficient across the entire region. The ability to create that housing is going to be tantamount to success for community building over time. And so, as you all know, but I'll just mention for the public, the city is being very deliberate and spending quite a bit of time thinking about how to create that type of housing stock. So tonight, we're looking to do a couple of things. I'm going to hand it off to Assistant Director King here to walk through tonight's agenda. We'll talk about the normal stuff that we usually talk about, but we're also going to talk about some of the financial strategies that are coming down the pike and look forward to all the big actions that we'll be undertaking, primarily through Ms. LeWine's efforts and some of our regional partnerships. So with that, I'll hand it off to Assistant Director King.
Thank you, Mac. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As City Manager Miyake noted, in June of 2017, the city adopted a very forward-thinking strategy to produce 2,500 units of affordable housing over a 10-year period through a series of very specific tools and actions. We have good news to report tonight regarding the production that has occurred over the past 2.5 years, and are very optimistic about new tools and actions that will add affordable homes in the near future in Bellevue. Some of the new items that we'll be covering tonight include an overall investment strategy that we outlined in your memo, and this looks at city funds available for affordable housing as we've accumulated money through actions of the council, as well as other monies that we have coming into the city. We're also going to be highlighting some of the human service needs that we could be using affordable housing money for in the near future. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Janet LeWine. She's our senior planner who is the lead for this effort in community development, and she'll walk you through our update.
Okay. Thank you. And, City Manager Miyake, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, we're very pleased to be here to present this update. Just a little context. Council adopted the Affordable Housing Strategy in June of 2017, but the 21 actions of the strategy will be adopted over a 4-year phased work program. We've seen delivery of affordable homes increase over historical averages from about 50 to 80 units a year to 158 units a year. Still, we're not at our expected yield, but it will take time to implement the full suite of tools to get us to that expected yield. So, this table shows Bellevue's strategy is focused on increasing affordable housing. We're really focused on building that opportunity for all people in the community to have homes that they can afford and live near where they work and stay in our community. This table shows affordable housing units realized or in the pipeline since the June 2017 adoption of the Affordable Housing Strategy. We've realized 494 affordable homes through a combination of market incentives and direct subsidy. We also have a pipeline, and this is what we're very optimistic about, of over 900 affordable homes that are expected to come in also through our incentive programs and our direct subsidy. We've achieved more units than we expected since some of the major actions are still being implemented. Now, this table shows our monitoring of how the adopted actions are achieving the affordable units. In the bottom of the third column, Bellevue's expected yield is that the strategy, when fully implemented, can produce or preserve 2,500 affordable units over 10 years. And just a few of the highlights, the market incentives, such as MFTE and density voluntary land use incentives, have resulted in 173 affordable units and a pipeline of 145. Bellevue's support for preservation is a priority strategy that has resulted in over 300 affordable units. Bellevue approving fund or surplusing city land for affordable housing. That's a really important strategy for achieving units and achieving units at lower affordabilities. We've achieved 62 affordable homes in that 30 Bellevue that opened this year, and a pipeline of 80 affordable homes just tied to this donation of the Spur property. And Bellevue land use density incentives in Bell Red, those have resulted in 89 affordable homes, but in Bell Red we also allow the fee in lieu option, and we've accumulated $2.87 million in fee in lieu that will be targeted to affordable housing in Bell Red. Here's a list of some of the actions that we've implemented to date. Now, some actions like A1 preservation, we don't just cross it off the list. We're still implementing those opportunities as they come about. But we've had projects that have been for preservation projects. Council approved utility rate relief review. There was a couple of updates and an extension of the multifamily tax exemption program. We've adopted affordable housing incentives in downtown and Eastgate. There's been changes to the condo statutes to increase condo development. And most significant, again, is the increase in funding that council has improved. Our historic $412,000 a year that's approved through the operating budget. Now we also have CIP contingency funds through 2025 of $15 million. And because of council's action authorizing HB 1406, an additional $625,000 is estimated to come in for affordable housing each year. This is a work program, expected work program for both CD and development services on some of the things to implement our affordable housing strategy. We'll be doing a land use code amendment for zero lot line townhomes, which is a great middle housing option. We'll be doing a targeted change to the accessory dwelling units. That will just be to remove the 3-year requirement for new construction. We are working in community development on TOD, including affordable housing at the operation and maintenance site in Belle Red and at the 130th station in Belle Red. We're continuing on the land use code amendments in East Maine, which will include affordable housing incentives. The comp plan amendment in Wilburton, hoping again to include affordable housing incentives. And we will be bringing back to council the affordable housing incentives for faith-based communities. Get my place here. And those we hope to bring back in the next 3 to 6 months, and we'll do that in a very community-sensitive manner. There we go. The affordable housing investment strategy there was a table that was included as an attachment into the memo, but we also put that table into the desk packet so that it would be more readable if you needed it. It didn't really show in the presentation very well. But it shows the current housing funds and projected input and output through 2024. Of course, there are many variables that will determine the timing and level of investment, including our ability to leverage other funds, the market opportunities for preservation, and interest from nonprofit housing partners. The table does not show specific projects for funding and attach any funding to them because they are not committed at this time. But this is the list of types of projects or specific projects that we know about that were considered in this next 4 years. We are expected to seek funding in the next 4 years. If we get the expected projects for funding that we see now and the expected levels of funding that we expect to be asked for, it seems that the funds that we have available will get out the door in this 2020 to 2024 timeframe. What we do have on the table are the sources of funding and the amounts that we have available and how we see them coming in. And that we can tie to the different kinds of housing projects. The operating budget general fund amount, which accrues in the Housing Fund 1900, that we typically call the Bellevue Housing Fund, and it's usually gone through the Arch Housing Trust Fund process. The housing fees in lieu, that's limited to Belle Red. We only have fee in lieu in Belle Red, so those will be used for Bellevue priority uses in Belle Red. The HB 1406 funds, now final rules for use of those are coming out of the Department of Commerce next month, but we expect that these funds can be used with Human Services for supportive housing services and the maintenance costs to increase housing stability. So we'll be looking into that when we get those final rules. And the 2019-2025 CIP contingency funds, those are also a very nimble funding source for Bellevue priority projects that will help us implement the affordable housing strategy. I know I keep looking up there to see things, but it's, it's in your packet. But this list shows how we are also considering our funding strategy, the projects that will yield high value projects. We will have continued support for ARCH in our funding strategy. We will continue to have the fee in lieu option in Bell Red, and with the potential to support human services with some of our housing funds with potentially HB 1406. And I guess this is just one more, little more information on the human services coordination. Of course, that's a priority strategy in our affordable housing strategy to help people keep in their home so that we don't dig the hole deeper. Some of the things that we can do in our strategy, coordinated with human services, is weatherization and funding for weatherization programs, and that results in energy savings and reduced costs for residents. Support programs that help seniors and disabled people keep in their home, and supportive services for affordable housing. So Bellevue's affordable housing program is working and gaining momentum. The units achieved each year we expect to increase as the actions are adopted and implemented. There's an importance to follow the affordable housing strategy, which lays out a variety of actions to achieve housing with partners through a variety of tools and at a variety of affordabilities in order to achieve our housing target. And, well, I guess I'll go back if there's any more questions.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to start with Deputy Mayor Newenhouse.
Oh, okay. Thanks for a great presentation, and congratulations on being well on our goal here to hit the 2,500 in
We are working.
Yeah, that's very exciting. The bad news, of course, is that conditions keep changing, and we need more and more. But still, I think it was back in 2017. It was still a bold vision and one that we've committed to, and we're going to hit that target. And you know, we should recognize that. So, congratulations on that. And I really appreciate the fact that you're looking at a lot of the different funding sources or with the funding pipeline, what that looks like, all these great different projects. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if we're well above that 2,500 by the 10-year term is over. I really do. One quick question, and I know I brought this up with Mac once before. When it comes to the micro apartments, specifically in TOD, so what is the process for a developer if he is looking or she is looking for either for a waive or a limited number of parking spots for that kind of workforce housing? Because really it's not going to pencil out for them if they have to have 1 or 2 parking spots per unit or per apartment. Because so often we have so many people coming into Bellevue, and I'll just look at my daycare that I drop off my daughter at. Every one of those employees are coming from Puyallup, they're coming from Kent, they're coming from Auburn. So, and these are people that would definitely take advantage of you know, different mobility options that we can offer. So what does that look like to go back to the parking, either to have a waived or limited, or look at creative ways so they could still build that micro apartment?
For our affordable housing strategy, we did here, in order to incentivize micro units, we need to address the parking. Right now, you could do a small apartment in any FAR zone, is my understanding, but you would be required to do the parking unless you do a parking study, which is allowed in our downtown in Bell Red in order to reduce the parking. We haven't seen that happen yet. There are some limitations on other parking options in downtown, but that is where we sit now. And when we can get it on the work program to look at parking, maybe we can look at addressing it specific to the code without going through that parking study.
Okay. And what does the parking study entail?
Thank you.
And is a developer paid for that, for the actual study?
Yeah, right now you can do a parking study in Bell Red and downtown, as Janet said, and the developer does do it. It's a relatively small cost in the grander scheme of things. We are wanting to potentially make an administrative change that is the parking study being approved earlier on in the process as opposed to later in the process, to give some assurance that if a developer would like to pursue the study, they can get an early indication if they can have that reduced amount. So I think that's a very big help, and that's what we've been hearing most about. The development community, from office developers to market rate to affordable housing developers, have all been supportive of that option of actually doing the homework, doing some good analysis to reduce parking.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Well, I'm excited about this work and really pleased that our projection is for 2,785 units, which is more than 10% over our goal. So that projection of 2,785, that doesn't include units that are outside city limits that we help fund through ARCH, does it?
That wasn't counted in that, no.
Okay, just wanted to make that point that we are participating in creating even more affordable units than that. So I like a lot of the proposals. The zero lot line townhomes has been a long time coming. I'm very supportive of that. The ADU, and just so that for the members of the public that are watching, this is not about detached. This is about allowing people who are building attached ADUs as part of a home to build them at this time they do their main structure, rather than having to wait 3 years, which saves money. And I'm supportive of the really all of these strategies. I'd like to see, in addition to these, the East Main Luca, as well as the Wilburton CPA, I think as we move forward, we need to look at a robust incentive system, because if those are going to be high-rise structures, we are going to have a very difficult time getting affordable housing under the current incentive system. The 5/1, 5/2 tends to work for affordable housing. 10, 20, 30-story buildings do not, because the steel frame construction is just too expensive. So we're going to need to have a really good economic analysis of that to see what we need to do to either allow a mix elevations of buildings on a site so we can have affordable housing in 5/1, 5/2, and obviously in the high rises, or to figure out a way that is adequate incentive so that those will pencil. Just putting that out there. On the also, one thing, there's a few things that aren't listed here, and we might be doing them anyway, but there's the Bell Red Look Back, which is also coming, and the fee in lieu, which is only allowed there. Don't know if we want to revisit that and have, or not, but that'll be something that we're going to want to talk about when we do the Bell Red Look Back. I think Deputy Mayor Newhouse was on the right track when he was talking about parking. Really, it goes to the cost. If we can reduce the costs of development, we can have more affordable housing. And one of those is, of course, the parking. I'm really glad to hear that you're talking about an earlier approval. We might want to have land use code, if we're doing land use code work on that, we might want to allow the parking study to be used outside of Bell Red and downtown for larger areas. I also, when it comes to cost, I've heard from developers about the requirement to build pretty significant sized playground. And when you're talking about micro units, playgrounds may not necessarily be, necessary, especially if you're right next to a park. So if we're doing some land use code work, I would like to see us look at that. I love kids. I have 3. Playgrounds are hugely important. Let me just say that. But the playgrounds were really, the requirement was really more for the woody walk-up, large-scale housing, not for these 5/1 on smaller lots. And they just make it unfeasible to do. We won't get the playground because we won't get the affordable housing. So it'd be good to look at that issue. So the cost. Also, on the MFTE, I was expecting that to come back so that we could adopt it citywide, because it's only allowed in certain zones. Is that coming back? When is it coming back? Because I really want it to come back.
bring it back.
Councilmember Robertson, yes, we remember the comment last time about wanting to look at it citywide and potentially expand the geographic areas, and we did commit, we build that into the work plan.
Okay.
I think we are absolutely, I'll say, we're absolutely committed to that. I'm just looking down at Assistant Director King. I'm not sure if we have an exact timing for you tonight.
Because
but we
it's
will-
not on this list. Okay. Finally, the other thing I would add to the list is that, and I assume we're doing this anyway, is that we need to always be keeping I know that, for example, our Parks Department is always looking at where's there open space that's not developed? Where can we, and they're always talking to owners to make sure that if some open space comes on the market, we can get it for parks. I hope that we're doing the same thing when it comes to some of these older apartment complexes that are ripe for redevelopment, because preservation is a lot less expensive than building new for when it comes to affordable housing. So do we have someone whose job it is to always keep their eye or his or her eye on that? What are we doing on that?
We continue to monitor what's available out there, and we're
Okay.
actually looking to even set up new partnerships out there for preservation opportunities.
That's excellent. Yeah, we want to definitely make sure we do the preservation. So anyway, I'm just very supportive, but like I said, I would add the cost reduction on parking and playgrounds, any land use code, things like that, and I would add the citywide MFTE and also looking for opportunities for preservation to the list. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberts. Councilmember Parksdale.
All right. Thank you for the update. Just curious in terms of how the targets were created. I remember seeing a map that showed targets by TOD, or like, it had number of affordable units by TOD. Is that still used to inform the targets? Or I guess my bigger question here is, are we setting the target based on what's possible, or are we setting the target based on the need?
It's based on what's possible.
Okay.
Our affordable housing strategy was very data-driven. We had, we looked at all of a very long, even a longer list than what we adopted, of actions that we might take to increase affordable housing. We presented them to council with a number of what number of units we might achieve, what affordabilities, what time it would take, what it would cost to achieve them. And then we picked this suite of tools and added them up and came up with that 2,500, what we could achieve over 25 years based on the analysis we had done of those tools. It was not a need-based number, but it is a number that will move us threefold from what we were achieving in the past. That's going to be 250 units a year, where we were doing 50 to 80 previously, is a big step up for the city of Bellevue.
Okay. So just to clarify, is the need higher than the possible, or vice versa? If the target was set based on what's possible?
Addressing affordable housing need, as Claudia Balducci mentioned earlier, is a very large number, and it wouldn't probably be solved with the 2,500.
Okay, so then that leads me to my last question, if I could. What tools are we leaving on the table that would help us get closer to the need versus just what's possible?
Let's see. I think we showed that mandatory incentives could get you more units. I would have said funding, but the council has stepped up and exceeded my expectations for funding. So there's just a few other things that we could push, but mostly being more aggressive with the tools that we have. Probably be the best way.
I think I might just offer also, there's an overall jobs housing balance question, and historically the city has been somewhat ambivalent in its urbanized areas, its growth target areas, for whether or not development came in as commercial development or as residential development. So we use a floor area ratio based system instead of a specific land use density per acre system in most of those areas. And so as a result, a significant issue is how much housing is getting produced relative to how much job growth is getting produced. And I know we've all talked about this a little bit, but it's going to become very pervasive with the enormous job growth that's coming in the next 3 or 4 years, which then tips the scale a little bit relative to how much housing you're producing and therefore how much is affordable. Because as everyone knows, Bellevue is a highly desirable area. And so, if you underproduce relative to demand, pricing tends to go up.
Got it.
Thank you. Did you want to say something else?
I just would, is there an intention to update the numbers, like sort of a rolling target, and maybe revisit sort of need versus possibility, kind of bringing in what you mentioned about the job housing gap?
We're monitoring the number of units achieved, and we're coming to you every 6 months for direction on how to proceed.
Okay, I'd like to see.
I think I might just offer there too, because the council did ask us to look at the overall affordable housing strategy. I want to say it was about a year ago, and were we on target? Were we getting, I know there was a tremendous amount of concern at the time, were we getting units sort of almost at all? So the fact that we're overproducing what the strategy from 3 years ago thought we might get is really a very positive progress. But I know there's a question out there, and several of you have raised this, well, what about the actual need? And at what point would we go back and look at revising the strategy itself? But for now, we are right on target with the adopted policies and strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speak and then I'll let the caller speak because I just have so much to say. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the work you've done over the years. I will say that that number that we picked that many years ago seemed very aspirational, and now it seems woefully low. And so I share Councilmember Barksdale's concerns that, that number is not as high an aim as we should have. But on the other hand, we're not turning down opportunities for affordable housing. That's not a limit. So if we far exceed it, that would be awesome. I think that it's just so important that we get a spectrum of affordabilities in Bellevue. That's what makes community, is having all types of people living in a community. And so having that full spectrum is really important to serve all the members of our community. And I think that this development period we're experiencing right now is a remarkable opportunity to take advantage of and to get as much affordable housing development as possible. So with that in mind, when we're talking about how many units we have developed currently that are affordable and how many are in the pipeline, if you do the numbers, you'll find that only 36% of them are due to our affordable housing incentives. And in the pipeline, it's only 15%. So I think that our incentives could be much stronger and would produce a whole lot more housing. So I really would like to emphasize a few things, and here I go. So I think we should decrease parking requirements in all TOD. And I think we need to make sure that our TOD zones are clearly, truly the half-mile radius around the transit nodes, because I know there's one a little bit off in the Bell Red. I think that the multifamily property tax exemption, MFTE, it'd be great to emphasize, like we have in Bell Red, the 3 bedrooms around what I call school-oriented development, so that families can afford to live in walking distance to schools. I'd love to see a timeline for our church property development opportunities. And I'd like you to come back with, as soon as possible, because that to me is a low-hanging fruit, and I know there's a lot of interest. And try to understand the criteria for review versus spot zoning of those properties. I would, tagging on to Councilmember Barksdale, I would like to look at the effectiveness of the mandatory inclusionary housing. We used to have that in Bellevue. I know we created a lot of units. And I know that when the council at that time voted it out, not only did we not create any more units, but we released the affordable units back to the market, and that was a real loss. I spoke with Arch about that. So I would like to look at the impact that mandatory inclusionary housing might have in our transit-oriented developments. And then with our funds, I'm really pleased with the amount of funds that we have accumulated. And I think that those funds, originally were intended to create affordable housing that normally you cannot get with incentives. And so I would love to examine how we can apply that to get more independent, affordable housing senior communities like Silver Glen. That's a great example. Or more affordable housing for families near schools, or micro units at $300 a month, you know? 75% of our homeless men could afford that because most of them are working. And so it'd be great to enable people the opportunity to be independent. That doesn't happen without a big boost. So I'd love to see if we could find out a way to do that. And then I like what Mac was talking about, looking at the office versus housing development percentage. It seems important as we look at Wilburton and Eastgate and other developing areas that we maintain a certain percentage of housing to office. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, Councilmember Stokes, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, Councilmember Zahn, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate getting this update
Hello.
and seeing what's been happening with the number of units. I think it's great that we've gone from 50 to 80 units a year to really hitting the 250 targets. But I think similar to what other council members have said, our landscape is changing, and so the jobs to housing balance, I think right now we're seeing a lot of office construction coming up, and so looking at really that housing balance and what we can do even more to accelerate this. I'm looking at the effectiveness of programs table, and if I take a look at what we're building, I'm also trying to understand, it looks like we have 862 low-income units and 350 moderate, and then there's the 316 that is preservation, so it doesn't really show whether it's low or moderate income. So my question is that the right mix of moderate versus low income, or should we be trying to get more moderate income units built? So that's one of the questions that I have. The other one is, I also agree with looking at parking, removing the parking requirements if we are within or reducing a half mile of frequent transit network, because I do think that we need to look at how to make sure that what we're building is all different types. My other question is, I know there's been some discussion about micro units. Is that the same as, maybe because I have two daughters in college, you know, the more dorm style where the units themselves don't have a lot, or maybe it's a smallish partial kitchen, but then there's some common spaces so that the actual units themselves are more affordable? Is that within this mix, or is that what micro also encapsulates?
I'm not certain how we would define a micro unit when we do pass, you know, specific legislation regarding parking and such. But other cities do establish certain sizes that their parking regulations would apply to. I know in our multifamily tax exemption, there's a certain size unit that requires, you know, more affordability. But it usually, when we do these regulations, then we attach the size to it.
Okay, I see. Because if I'm still staying on the table, I'm just looking because it looks like the first number of strategies, we've been able to get housing units. But when it comes to extending the MFTE to get housing, it doesn't look like we've moved on that. The one about helping with low-income homeowners, people with low income become homeowners, I'm not seeing anything there. And then on the ADUs, while I appreciate that we're looking at removing the 3 years so that when someone's building, they can have an ADU, I am trying to understand if we're also looking at strategies, so existing housing, because if I think about seniors that want to age in place, and the ability for them to actually have an accessible dwelling unit within their house so that they can make some income as well as potentially providing housing. Is that one of the strategies we're looking at?
We are looking at different ways to expand the ADU program. As far as right now, we do allow attached ADUs like you're describing, but as far as expanding it to detached, we are working that through our neighborhood planning program, having conversations about where those are appropriate and would implement them in self-selected neighborhoods.
Okay. And then I agree with really focusing on preservation as well and keeping people in their homes. My other question is, I know Microsoft had pledged a significant amount of potential funding, and some of the things they were talking about is reviewing our codes to look at whether there were any changes needed to facilitate being able to build quicker from the standpoint of process. Is that another area we're also looking at?
Yes, council members on, we are evaluating all of those different things, and our Development Services Department and our Planning Division, Community Development are looking at which strategies may help the production of housing in general and or affordable housing.
Okay. Well, I support all of these, and also looking back at the rest of our strategies to see if there's any others that we can add to the programming. I understand that it will be a real pressure on staff to get moving on all of these pieces, but I think that the urgency is real in terms of housing affordability and getting more housing stock built, especially at both the low income and the moderate income levels. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think this has been a great discussion, and I'm very pleased to see a lot of energy and thoughts on improving this, because there's a lot to be done. You know, the time in the 3 years, things have drastically changed, and the situation is getting better. I think it's great that we're exceeding goals, but I think the comments on, are we looking at what we think we can do at a certain level, or are we really focusing goals on the need? And I think that's the latter is what we need to do. And one of the things that, and without going over everything that's been said, I think it's been great, and I think we're looking at the right things on that. And certainly on the current inventory of older housing and all of that is very, very important as well. But I think part of what we have to do is look at is in terms of the changes and all of the development that is coming into Bellevue, what that's going to mean in terms of affecting affordable housing. And at the same time, looking at transportation and the fact that we have so many people coming from way out, away from here into work, and the workforce housing is not available. I think that we have a lot of areas to work on and actually stretch more than we are, because things have changed so much. I mean, things are changing more rapidly now than they ever have, and we have to stay ahead of that. So I think it's a good ideas and good oversight of what we've been doing now, and it is exciting. And one thing I wanted to suggest in terms of kind of looking at things from a little different perspective is to take the King County Housing strategies, because that was developed after hours, and I think there were some innovation or some really different ways to look at things that we could incorporate. So I would like to take a look at that. We always need to be looking at not just what we have written down, but what the possibilities are. So this is exciting, and I think a lot of good ideas have been put forward, and I hope we keep progressing, because we're going to need even more housing as things go forward, more affordable housing at all levels. So good discussion, and looking forward to continuing and actually making progress on this.
Great, thank you. So what's your timeline for coming back to us with some recommendations or strategies on
Right, so
how we might move forward?
our normal routine would be coming back in 6 months from now. I think we're going to regroup as a staff to see if it makes sense to come back earlier than that.
Okay.
with an update.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
And then just because it was mentioned earlier, separate from that, the C1 strategy exists as its own work plan item, different than the overall affordable housing strategy. So that'll
C1
be.
is what again?
C1 is the faith-based and
Oh, good.
nonprofit zoning
So
discussion.
that's coming back.
So that'll come back sooner in the 3 to 6 month timeframe, and then somewhere probably in the middle of that time period, we'll be looking at another update and/or strategy discussion.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to say something? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Councilmember Barksdale.
Sorry, just really quick. I think as part of the update, it'd be interesting to see a timeline of like when we would need milestones along the way versus just here's the target and here's what we need by the end. But like, what would we need to hit along the way that doesn't already exist? Thank you.
Okay, great. I'd just like to applaud our council for our united support of affordable housing. That's what it takes to get things done.
Indeed.
Yes.
This is the last topic of the evening. This is a discussion of the Housing Fund allowance allocation recommended by the Arch Board, Executive Board. This was last in front of Council back in March 15th of 2018 when Council approved funding for 4 recommended projects. There was none for 2019. Tonight's presentation will include some background on the review process, a description of the projects proposed for the Bellevue funding. So joining us this evening is Kate Behrens, Deputy City Manager. She is the City of Bellevue's Arch Board representative, and joining her is Klaus. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kate.
Yes, and I am here really with Lindsay being out in case it would be helpful to the council to have a board person perspective, or if you have questions about how the board balance certain things. Klaus Naos, who's the senior planner at Arch, is really here going to do the yeoman's work of the presentation and get into the details. So, Klaus, take it over.
Thank you. Delighted to be here tonight. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, City Manager. My name is Klaus Naos, and as Ms. Behrens introduced me, I am a senior planner, been with Arch for about 11 years, and the domain that I lord over is the trust fund, getting applications all the way through the ongoing administration and sustainability of those projects. So delighted to be able to present to you the recommendations that evolved this year through the efforts of our member staffs, members of the planning departments of all our member cities, as well as our Citizen Advisory Board. I want to make mention that we have the former chair of our Citizen Advisory Board, Dave Elliott, in the audience tonight. I believe he's making sure that I say the right things. He will be reporting on this at our next Citizen Advisory Board meeting. Anyway, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get direction from you all about these recommendations and hopefully to advance these recommendations to an award for funding for these projects. Maybe a little confusion. I came in when Imagine Housing was presenting, and their discussion indicated that they felt that they had already received the $750,000 for that Sama project to acquire the land. No, it has not been received. We are bringing back the recommendations of our executive board to each of our member city councils, which time, when those resolutions are passed to make these funding awards, then they will have received that. So, slideshow is a little bit about background, the interlocal, which is the action of this city and Redmond and Kirkland back in the early 1990s, along with King County, to form Arch as an interlocal force multiplier for those cities, essentially to advance housing strategies, affordable housing strategies, and to administer a housing trust fund. Since 1992, our membership has grown to include all the East Side municipalities within the Growth Management Act boundary that aren't insular. So, and they all invest and they all benefit, and we provide resources to all those cities. So, in terms of the trust fund, which is one area of activity, the other areas of activity include planning and public affairs, getting the word out, and then the overall administration of the portfolio that's created. So for the Arts Trust Fund, you have empowered us through our interlocal agreement to run a trust fund application process, and then to bring back the results of that application to our member city councils for approval. We also work in conjunction with the developers who present those applications, and quite often modify, advance the proposals that they bring. For example, when Imagine Housing brought forth their SAMA project, it was 54 units, and that's what my slide will show. They told you that it's now 73 units. That is because we did some visioning, and because we're only doing, the recommendation is to advance money to buy the site, there's time to get a better project out of it. That happens at the front end before we get into contract. We do get into contract, and that is both conditions of funding, which you saw in the memo that came from the executive board, as well as making sure that those contract conditions are adhered to, and then the construction is carried out, and then we monitor on an ongoing basis the results of that contract, that project that is produced. Mentioned the Citizen Advisory Board. We have members from all our member cities, and we're happy to have a range of expertise on that panel, ranging from bankers to designers to urban planners to real estate people, attorneys. So we feel that they are strong in vetting the projects that we finally bring back to you for recommended funding. And the Housing Trust Fund is administered here at Bellevue, as probably you know, and each city has its own sub-accounts, and each city drops into those sub-accounts money on an annual basis, and from that we award these projects their funding. A little bit about the trust fund process. Annually, we establish how much is available. We announce that in notice for funding. We have a pre-application process where interested parties come to us and talk through their ideas. Then they present us with a formal application, which is reviewed through several steps, as outlined in the center of that slide. And then we coordinate with the other funders in order to maximize the capital resources that we can bring to bear to create these and realize these projects. Once that is done, we have the executive board act on the Citizen Advisory Board recommendation, and that recommendation comes to you, councils, for approval. Once approved, we notify the agencies, and we work to contract for those projects, monitor construction, and finally monitor the occupancy, the affordability, the rents, the quality of life within those projects that are created. So the slide is a little faded. I believe there was a map handed out. These are the areas where we have created housing through the trust fund. $64 million of city funds have been contributed over the life of Arch, and those $64 million have leveraged $615 million worth of other resources. So for a total that's just shy of $700,000 of investment through the Arch Trust Fund. So the investment principles that Arch relies on are this cross-jurisdiction support. We believe that through a competitive process, the best projects advance, and we try to leverage and maximize the return on the local investment. We're always striving for geographic equity, and along with that geographic equity, we have definitions about the types of housing that we want to create with the trust fund. So there is a distribution over 4 types: family housing, senior housing, special needs housing, and homeless housing. And we try to meet those goals in the long term. We also want to make sure that the community is well served by the housing and that the housing well serves the community. It's a good neighbor. We talked a little bit about the sustainability, the financial sustainability that I monitor, but we also try to advance projects that are also economically sustainable, environmentally sustainable. And then we mentioned the coordination that we do between ourselves and the various other funding agencies and planning agencies. And that is for the purpose of elevating the best East Side projects. So the first project that is being recommended for funding in this trust fund round, and I need to mention that we have made a proposal to commit $5 million worth of trust fund in this round. That is the available sources after setting aside $4 million for the OMFE project, which our executive board acted on earlier this, or late last year. $19 million of requests. We were able to fund 6 projects with $5 million. Some are fully funded, some are partially funded. This first project, Sama Senior, is one where we partially fund. $750 allows us to buy the land, discounted land from the city of Bellevue, and then get it dedicated for this, what's now, I believe, a 73-unit senior housing project located very near one of the largest senior centers within the nation. So it's a great opportunity there, and it's one of the first projects in Bellevue after they have started making commitments to the trust fund beyond their CDBG contributions. So we're really excited about that project. The next project is the East Side Men's Shelter. You saw this come to you in the 2014 round as a 50-unit shelter. At that time, it was envisioned to go into multi-tenant space, probably light industrial space, and the need then was characterized as 50 men. It's grown to 100 men. They've had their challenges in terms of finding a site, working with the city of Bellevue and King County. The focus is now on acquiring a 10-acre parcel from King County, which has to be acquired at market rate. The shelter only needs a tiny portion of that, so the only way this is going to be realized is to get a for-profit partner, in this case, to the table to help take down the entire parcel and to develop the majority of that site. That happened last year. I'm happy to announce that Inland Group, which develops affordable 60% AMI units, is the selected partner. And not only are we now recommending fully funding the congregation's ask for the additional funds to get to the 100-bed shelter size, which is $500,000, but we're also recommending partially funding to demonstrate our earnestness in taking down this site for the Inland Group. So that project is called Polaris at Eastgate. It will create 300 units of affordable housing at 60% AMI, and it will be set aside for families with children and disabled. And it takes over the major portion of the site. You heard in the previous discussion the opportunity for supportive housing, and in fact, situated on the upper plateau with the shelter is an opportunity due to some supportive housing, which will be downstream. Arch is all about attracting the best and the most leverageable resources to our community. The Together Center redevelopment affords us that opportunity to catch 9% tax credits for the creation of 80 units of housing at very low incomes. The majority of those units will be made available to individuals coming out of homelessness. The site is large, and it affords the additional opportunity for another 200 units of 60% AMI housing. And we're recommending fully funding the 9% phase and a significant portion for the 4% phase to allow that to advance. This will get us our fair amount of 9% tax credits to land here in East King County. The last two projects are in response to a proposal by Community Homes Incorporated. They have done now 7 adult family homes. Several of those are located in this city, and they're typically 5-bed group homes for developmentally disabled individuals who have a living care provider live with them. So it's usually split levels, 2-story homes where the care provider lives on one level and the individuals living with developmentally disabled disabilities live on another level, somewhat independently, but to have that care provider co-located with them. That is a model that works for that agency very well, but they also have higher need individuals. So this year they came with a new proposal that says, well, for those higher need individuals, a living care provider can probably still work, but let's reduce the number down to 3 beds. The good news with that one is that they have a potential site in Newcastle already identified and ready to move forward with that project. In the last round, when we funded adult family homes, it was challenging because of the rate of acceleration of the market, and the budget that was proposed and funded really was a tough one to meet with the available housing stock. So this table shows the number of units that we're proposing to fund. It's almost 800 units or beds, and this distribution over the various income levels. So a good percentage of those are in the very, very low income, and then a fair number at 60% AMI. This is the distribution of funding that's being recommended to the cities. Yours is the line right under general funds. So it's a $1.86 million investment you would be making in this round. That's a lot more than you have done in past rounds, but last year we didn't come to you with any proposals that were viable. So we have the accumulation of 2 years of funds, and we have the interest earned on those funds, and we also have had a number of loan repayments on the funds that we extend. So you have a healthy balance, which is in excess of $7 million, and we're asking you to make a commitment of $1.866 million. So that's my presentation. You probably have questions, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councilmember Jean, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. So I'm looking at the table. So the 298 at Polaris, that is not currently counted in the previous presentation because it wouldn't be one in the pipeline until we approve. Is that how it works?
So I believe it was shown in the presentation. When I looked at the slide that Janet posted, it indicated the 100 beds for the men's shelter and 300 units of housing.
It is. It was included in the affordable housing update strategy.
Okay. All right. I was checking because, and is the 60% considered in the low income category and the moderate would be the 80% AMI? Or I want to make sure I'm oriented. In the previous presentation, we had low and we had moderate. How that fits into the AMI percentages here?
I believe, and the definitions range depending on who you're talking with. 60% we consider low income housing. 80% to 120 we consider moderate, and above that market in this current marketplace.
Okay, that's fine. I was just trying to understand. I'm glad that we are moving ahead with all of these pieces. But I do remember last year, I think the only thing we funded was one home with maybe 5 or 6 beds. And so this is really moving us forward into getting more units. On the adult family homes, was that a renovation of 2 existing houses?
Yes. Typically, when we see proposals from Parkview Services Foundations for the Challenged or community homes, it is the acquisition of a single-family home and then converting it to allow that population to either live with a care provider or to be serviced around the clock by non-resident care providers.
Okay, and then I noticed that the Parkview had several proposals that we didn't fund, and one of them it looked like maybe we didn't have quite enough clarity, but the other one it sounded like because we only had a certain amount of money, we couldn't fund that one, and because we had given some money to Parkview to build in 2014, and we hadn't for CFH since 2012. So the reason I'm asking the question is, were there some other projects that if we had the money, we would have funded?
I would say that the Parkview projects, one did have a lot of merit. One was structured similar to a program that ARCH already administers, which is Down Payment Assistance Program. And that program that Parkview was recommending was specifically creating housing ownership opportunities for persons living with disabilities, and the ARCH program also allows that. So given that we had $19 million worth of ask and only $5 million to allocate, there were some tough decisions. We did tell Parkview that we're interested in looking at applications in the future from them. And our Citizen Advisory Board this year has taken it upon themselves to look at the Down Payment Assistance Program to see how ours works, how theirs works, and how they might work in concert with each other. So we want to, again, use our resources, very limited resources, strategically. So we'll be taking that on, and we let them know that.
That would be good, because that came up in the previous presentation. And I do think that perhaps this is one of the areas that as we get into our biennial budget and funding or budget later on this year, we really need to take a look at whether we are funding to the level that we need to based on the needs that we have. So that's one of the things. And then my last comment is, in the packet materials, there was a table that talked about cost per, but it wasn't using consistent denominators. So it looked like some were talking about cost per unit and some were talking about cost per bed. And it looked like it ranged all the way from $141,000 per bed to $393 per unit. So I'm wondering, it would be helpful to maybe normalize it to cost per bed. So if a unit has an occupancy of 2 people, because I think it's kind of hard to understand and get a gauge for the cost of these different projects when the basis that we're using to present is mixed.
I'm noting your comment. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think that was also helpful to understand from a performance standpoint whether there are some projects that are able to be built more affordably, so we can maybe look at lessons learned and what are some things that are takeaways for other projects that would also help bring the price down. So thank you.
Thank you.
From the project engineer. Councilmember Stokes.
I know, I can't help it.
Yeah, it's a great presentation. It's exciting to see, to really see these numbers and understand sometimes we don't aren't aware, don't pay a lot of attention to this, but I think it's amazing. I particularly like the focus on the east side, the shelter, the Eastgate projects. Those are very important, and it's exciting to have those come along. And have Arch's involvement in that. And the Together Center redevelopment, I mean, it's just across the line from us. It's one of these artificial boundaries. We don't know whether we're in Redmond or Bellevue when we're driving around there. And it's an amazing complex that will serve the whole region, serve actually people who come in and out of Bellevue as well. So, I think it's great to see all of the pieces put together and how much is actually involved, and gives us some hope that we are really making, in conjunction with our direct affordable housing strategies, that along with ARC, we're really making some great strides in Bellevue and the region, and this is a regional problem, so it's exciting, and it really I think verifies the concept that was put together so many years ago with Arch, and still is producing, and I'm very pleased to see the great progress made these last couple of years. This is exciting, and I wholeheartedly support this moving forward to bring it back to its final action.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you. So kind of building on one of the previous questions I think Councilmember Zahn asked in terms of other projects, were there other projects that were also closer to transit, light rail stations or anything like that?
No, I believe the board recommendation that was transmitted covers everything that ended up at the end of the process being sort of viable and continuing through the CIV, where, as we said, the requests outpaced the amount we had. And so you see that we partially funded requests and took the approach as we answered in the previous on the group homes.
Got it. Is there any, I didn't necessarily see it as criteria, and I mean, I know it's expensive to build in TOD areas, but just given the priority, given that you don't need to own a car and many of the benefits, is that part of the criteria?
There are significant projects in the pipeline.
Okay.
It's coming closer to TOD with the opportunities that Sound Transit property represents. So that was also part of the board calculus, was making sure that we looked ahead a couple years to see how we're going to be able to continue all of those projects, which also compete well for some of the other funding sources that are consistent with TOD. So you'll see, I think, and as the affordable housing strategy update also covered, we're sort of looking ahead and seeing a lot coming around TOD. The Bothell project is close to transit. Together Center, I think, is well served by transit. So a number of other.
Right, and I also want to point out that, yes, transit-oriented development is a priority for us. Some recent examples are the Estera project at the group health site in Redmond that was probably 3 funding rounds ago, the Velocity and Kirkland Crossing at the South Kirkland Park and Ride. So yeah, we do get those opportunities. It is truly a function of available sites and available resources. But yeah, we very much encourage TOD.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. I have a few questions. The amount that Bellevue's funding this cycle looks like it's about 44% of the total funding, not counting the community development block grants. What percentage are we of the whole for ARCH?
What percentage are you for the whole?
Because usually it seems like we're funding a bigger percentage than we usually do. That's
I think over time, we actually it has evened out to we're about 1/3 of the funding and about 1/3 of the units have been produced in Bellevue. Okay. Looking ahead to 2020, as Klaus mentioned, the board took action to significantly set aside funds for an OMF project. And whether Bellevue contributes additional cash to that over and above the property we've already contributed is something that we'll have to consider separately when the proposals actually come in, but the rest of the arts jurisdictions have made a significant commitment to that project in particular. There's also in the pipeline more to come, we expect, for the Eastgate project. So both Polaris, which got sort of encouraging funding this round, and the potential third project for the supportive housing, both the board was interested in seeing that coming back. So in the next couple rounds, you may see that swing the other way, and over time, it's relatively evened out.
Right. Well, and when we do have the OMF come back, it should reflect Bellevue's, $5 million land value
Yes, we
donation.
all-
So-
They
'cause
always
that's-
account for
that
those
is
land
not
contributions in the
insignificant.
totals.
Because I was wondering if this was Bellevue being doubled. Has everyone kind of caught up from last year and doubled, or only a few jurisdictions doing that?
So we've had new members who've never contributed in the past start funding the trust fund, and most of the jurisdictions did do a significant increase in their funding, yes. So where we used to advertise in around $1 million, $1.2 million, had we just relied on just the resources from the last year, we would have advertised for $2 million worth of available funding. So yes, everybody stepped up.
Got it. No, I appreciate that there's such a huge push this year. It just surprised me after having seen this year after year that Bellevue's percentage seems to be creeping up compared to the whole, and that worries me because this arch is meant to be all of these communities in it together based on kind of our proportionate share, and Bellevue's share looks bigger. The other thing that surprised me this funding round is how much of a percentage of the Together Center redevelopment Bellevue's paying. Usually the community where the units are being created pays more, and in this case, we're paying 4 times as much as the community that's hosting it. So what's that all about?
That's cash.
Okay.
As you are doing with land donation, the city is considering fee and lieu's allocation to that project. So right now, it's cash. The project needs more funding, and the developer is talking with the city about.
Okay, so they might be throwing more in on outside of the arch process. Okay, that makes sense. Then on congregations for the homeless and Polaris, given that the property has not transacted and we don't have price on it yet, what security will Arch have to make sure that these two $500,000 or $500,000 and $575,000 donations will actually be utilized for the project? We want to make sure that they're secured so that if this deal falls apart, Arch can give that money to a project that will actually create units.
As with all projects, there are stipulations, funding conditions that the developer has to meet in order to get the money. The money does not go out the door until they have met those conditions, and typically that includes getting fully funded, having site control, those sort of things. Because it is now proposed as essentially an affordable development, that devalues the land significantly. It's a strategy for getting that price down. So though you hear the price has not been settled on, all these strategies are working towards getting as low a market price, which the county needs to achieve, as is possible.
Okay, but that money will not be distributed until that's transacted. Okay, great. Finally, one final thing. I saw in the materials that the Housing Trust Fund to date has generated 3778 units. Yay. Does that include the CDBG generated units?
Yes and no. There are, through King County contracted, or contracts, a number of CDBG units that count towards Arch, and I don't believe are in that mix. So, but it's a small number.
And the 3778 is over the, what, last 10 years?
No, that's over the life of the trust fund.
Okay. Do we have a projected unit generation going forward. I'd love to have that because I know you were in the audience during the last presentation where Bellevue's looking at what we're forecasting will be developed as a result of our direct efforts. Is that something Arch will be
Well,
prepared?
Arch does look at it pretty regularly and discusses with the executive board. It truly is a function of the other resources that we can leverage. So we talked about the ability to attract a 9% tax credit. The amount of 9% tax credits currently available within the state of Washington are such that a third would land in King County and about a third of those equitably would land in North and East King County, outside of Seattle. That amount that we would get committed to North and East King County would typically only fund about 70 to 90 units of deeply affordable housing in a year. That is the limiting factor. Even if we get all the trust fund money from the state, we get our fair share of King County's housing finance program money, that is sort of a limiting factor. Other projects attract less leverage. We had 2 4% projects where we need to contribute about $100,000 a unit of local funding in order to advance those projects. So it is really a function of the resources available out there. And even the 4% tax credit funding overall probably will only allow 150 units of housing production in East King County in a given year.
Let me just go back at this another way, and you don't need to respond. It would be great if the next time we receive a general update from Arch, we had some idea of what we're expecting in the next decade ahead, as far as general units in the Arch area. Great, thanks. Given current funding and growth projections.
Yeah, and, yep.
I think that would be really, and present law and all that stuff. I think that'd be very helpful to me. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Newenhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation. Thanks so much for being here tonight, and a lot of great comments, a lot of great questions. Most of my questions have been answered by, or were posed by Councilmember Robertson. So I love the mix of projects here. I think it's really thoughtful. Everything from the senior apartments to the men's shelter to the adult community homes, adult family homes. I think it's really wonderful to see. I would share Councilmember Robertson's concern though, because one thing that did strike me right away was that imbalance or disproportionate funding towards Arch from Bellevue, comparatively speaking to the other cities. And it sounds like that evens out over the years. That's fine, but something that I'll be looking at going forward, as well as I think would be great, as Councilmember Robertson mentioned about the forecasting of units going forward as well. Sounds like that would be great to see what we can expect in a 5, 10, 15-year period. I think that would be great to look at. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you both for your involvement, everybody's involvement with Arch. You know, Arch gets projects done that wouldn't happen without it. And this list is representative of that. And I'm just so grateful that we have this organization that gets all our cities together to coordinate our efforts and get these things done, because we all benefit from them. And I do want to give a shout out to the mayor of Clyde Hill, Marion Kloss, for their contribution is very generous for the size of their city, 3,300 people. I was confused. This is kind of a semantic thing. I think of adult family home as being for seniors, and I think of adult group home as being what you described here. So have they changed the names of these things?
They have not. So an adult family home is a different licensing than a group home situation. Group homes are the product of Parkview Services, a foundation for the challenge. And what the living arrangement there is, it is the entire residence is that of those developmentally disabled adults. The care providers come in shifts to take care of them. The adult family home is a model that is supported both for senior living as well as for persons with disability, where it's a licensed facility with a live-in provider.
Okay, thank you for that. I wasn't sure about that. Okay, great. Well, I'm very supportive of this, and I would like to encourage all our fellow cities to give as much as they can toward this, because as I said, it's good for the whole region. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask you, is it possible to get the approval project by project as opposed to just a mass, have you come back per project? I'm just curious as to how we would do this.
So that has not been the practice in the past. It's a slate of well-vetted projects, and we believe that councils would act on that entire proposal.
Okay.
But it's your purview, right?
All right, thank you. Well, based on my fellow council members' comments, I'm going to assume that we're going to have a motion to direct you to, you go ahead with the motion. Do you have it in front of you?
I do not, but I can read. So I want to move to direct staff to prepare legislation approving ARCH funding requests for council's consideration and action at a future meeting.
Second.
Third. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. So approved. Thank you. I believe that is the end of our meeting. Are there any, I did not get any emails with communications.
No, I didn't. None came in.
Okay, so we are adjourned.